things that the coach need to help this leader to unlock. So the coach does not come in as an instructor. The coach comes in as a person who prods, who kind of like lets the potential of the leader comes out. And most organizations, Fortune 500 or the best, even in our country, there's always a coach attached to maybe the CEO, not to teach them, but more of like a sounding board. And a coach functions by asking questions, and not only questions, but the correct questions to help the leader to move to where they want to get. So the coach and the coachee, when we are in a coaching session, the coachee kind of leads, and the coach has this knowledge and control to let the coachee lead, so that the coachee realizes where they need to improve or what they need to do. So it's like the coach is like a key. Because the owner of the coachee has the key, yes, but you just turn the key that the coachee has. And therefore, as leaders, the approach I have with this is that as leaders, we need to coach our direct reports. But we also, as leaders, may need to identify people whom we think can coach us so that we can achieve our full potential. I want to pause there and invite your comments about what you feel. I loved the discussions that you had about the image of the eagle and the other bird that I had posted. And some of us were saying the smaller bird is the coach, the bigger bird is the coachee, or the mentor and the mentee. That was an interesting discussion. But I want to open up and hear what are your views. Do you have coaches, your leadership coaches? Do you coach? Do you have coaching policy, mentoring and coaching policies? How is it in your organizations? I want to hear from you. And I think we have just a few minutes before the next speaker comes in, so your comments are welcome. Did you hear that? Yes.
Yeah, for me, I think I appreciate the two concepts of coaching and mentoring. And what I learned in where I work is in the mentor and mentee relationship is kind of a senior and a junior manager relationship where you are instructing, helping the junior manager go through the process. By coaching, on the other hand, is the junior manager taking it upon himself to achieve the results, of course, being guided by the senior manager. I tend to think I highly prefer the coaching over mentorship. That is for me, because it gives the junior staff the energy to go and do things and really report the results back to you. This is my general observation and opinion on the two approaches. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That is Samal Lokuno. Thank you very much. Do you have any other comment? Yes, Samson, is your hand up?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Thank you very much. I think the mentor-mentee relationship, coach-coachee relationship is very, very important, because in terms of mentorship, you at least being shown the way by somebody who has already been there. Assuming that this is in a workspace environment where you have, assuming that like in government, people are to rise through the ranks on merit, then if somebody has been able to rise the ranks up to the level of a PS, then these PS should be able to tell this new entrant what he has done, what has worked for him in order for him to achieve his dream of being a PS. The same is also true when you come to private sector. Coach-coachee relationship, number one, in my view, it doesn't have to be within the same organization, because the coach is supposed to engage the coachee in a very thoughtful, intelligent question sessions where the thoughts of the coachee is being provoked to start looking at things from a different dimension, but most importantly, for the coachee to understand himself, know the potential that he has, know the horizons which he can rise to. The most tragic part, in my view, is that coaching has been limited to leadership. And to me, I think this is a bit of a challenge, because I know it is expensive to go through coaching sessions, but research also shows that those who have gone through coaching sessions, they deliver way much better compared to the people who've not gone through coaching sessions. I look at it in terms of family, in terms of religion, in terms of bringing up teenagers, in terms of parenting, all these things to an extent, especially in the most advanced societies, you find that coaching is an ongoing process. Even when one gets home, finds that a pet is not behaving the way it was expected to behave, and the person does not want to get to a level of stress or depression, more often than not, you find that these people will be running to coaches so that they can be helped to understand themselves more and better, and be able to relate with the situation such that they are able to make themselves better. So coachee is very important, but I think for purposes of this discussion, we limit it to leadership, when I think it should be broad in every area of life which affects one. And then mentoring to me is about somebody who has already done what you are expected to do. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you very much, Samson. I guess you're very correct in your analysis. We need a coach. Actually, when you look at the coaching and mentoring profession, it's again another fast-growing profession, because most leaders, you will find, any leaders who have been successful, you'll find that there was a coach attached to them. You may find an author I like, the Jim Collins. They did the coaching for people like Benzos, and even Obama is linked to what Jim Collins did, and therefore we can see the achievements they have done. And you've also seen this even in a game like football, right? The coach helps the team to work together to achieve a goal. And the team, if there's maybe one super player, if we think we want to rely on one super player, sometimes we don't succeed. And you always wonder, why is that team not succeeding? And yet they have a very good player. It is not on the basis of how one player can play, but how can we play as a team? So the work of the coach again in football is to bring us together so that we can be able to work as a team and win together. And yes, you are very correct. There are performance coaches, there are behavioral coaches. We can find a coach along the way of life, just as you mentioned. Damaris, you want to say something?
Yeah, thank you, Mwalimu. I just want to make a comment and also probably pose a question on the issue of mentoring and coaching, especially in the in public service. I'm in public service, so
yes.
I think it's something that it has not been mainstreamed in our programs, and I don't know what the feeling is from the other participants, also from the public service, because I feel like sometimes, like in public service, of course, and probably even in the private sector, but succession management is very important, and you would have to coach and mentor those who you want to come after you and do what you're doing and even do better. But sometimes I feel like you go to organizations and it's like sometimes the young people are not so much welcome. I don't know whether to use that word, because sometimes the young people are. Sometimes I like to call them. I don't know that to call it fast and furious. They learn things very fast. They use technology, and sometimes they'll even outshine their bosses. And this is the supervisor who is supposed to be coaching and mentoring you, and sometimes they feel like you know too much. So that relationship. So I'm just, it was just an observation and a feeling that maybe we need to, in the public service, we need to improve and try to mainstream this aspect of coaching and mentoring in our programs and yeah.
Wow.
And strategies. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Damaris. Evelyn, please. Evelyn?
Yes, thank you.
Go ahead.
No, yes, also me talking at the viewpoint of a public sector, I think I want to concur with the other speaker that in the public sector, I don't know whether it is the understanding of the mentorship and coaching that has not hit our minds in the public sector. Because I don't know whether the attitude is right. Why? Because I don't know whether the people who are supposed to entrench this the policy or to bring it down for implementation, they have understood what mentorship and coaching is. Sometimes I don't know whether they understand whether it is just succession, so that they don't leave a vacuum when they are not there in the future, when they have retired. And I don't know whether they understand or we understand that when we mentor and coach, it is not our positions that are being taken. It is only preparing a future generation to be able to get the experience to work in our positions. And I think one thing we must remove, we have been talking about IQ, EQ, and also other intelligences. I don't know whether sometimes when we are managers or when we are leaders, there is some jealousy in it or fear of unknown, such that we don't want really, even if the policy is there, we don't want to implement it to the full, so that people are enlightened, so that people are able to understand this mentorship and coaching to bring up their minds and put them in the positions where we would want them to go in future. So mine is that it is the attitude in the public service. They don't want to mentor the young ones. And even the older ones, they don't want to mentor their deputies, things like that. Thank you.
Wow. Leaders, we stand accused. Sami Kipto, can you exonerate us?
Well, thank you, Madam, for giving me this opportunity.
Yes.
I am also interested to contribute in terms of this issue of coaching and mentoring. One,
yes,
like the way it was just left said, in public service, the concept of coaching is not coming out clean. Coaching means to the seniors, whom some of us we met in the service, are taking up their position. When you mentor somebody or you coach somebody in public service, that person who is coaching you will see that you are now succeeding him in the position. So some of us who perhaps are working in a legislative institution, we clearly understand that there is no university that offers any course in terms of legislative matters, those the procedures, the usages, name them. Nobody. No university in Kenya can offer that course. So we just learn through coaching, maybe perhaps from Senate, Parliament, and those people who have retired in legislative institutions. So it is good that when we also mention this concept of mentorship and coaching, it is also part of us enumerating on succession planning. You coach those people, or rather you mentor, so that in the near future, when you've left the office, you get somebody who can do better than you. Somebody said that at a point way back in 2012 or 2013, somebody whom I had telling an attaché from SUNY, there was a program called SUNY, told it that attaché, wewe unakaa Kerere, wewe unakaa unajua mingi. Because you know, the attaché knew a lot of things in terms of legislature. So in my perception, or rather in my take, that we should encourage the concept of coaching or mentoring for the purpose of us also creating room of succession. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I can't help but laughing here. But let me give Adan Hajishunu 1 minute to conclude on that. I'm sorry if I didn't pronounce your name properly. Maybe you can start by correcting me, then you proceed.
Actually, you're pronounced correctly.
Thank you.
Yes, Adan Shunu. Adan Haji Shunu, it's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Addressing the issue, mentorship. Actually, I work in public sector, and mentoring is actually based to be somebody who is more senior than you, who is actually have the experience based on the position and the work. But at the same time, in public service, the mentoring is coming down, the rate of mentoring, because of the threats of unknown. Because you see, those people who are initially employed in public sector, they were actually, most of them who are almost retiring, they were immediately from four levers, and then the young ones actually they're exposed to educationally, they have experience and they are well equipped. So when you find that when you want to mentor a junior position who has just an entry, you develop a fear of this guy is going to even take supervisory position, and yet it's not a reality. On the exposure of coaching, in my perception, coaching is both ways. A junior officer can coach a senior based on his potentials. Maybe a senior, he is reluctant on exploring a position, and based on his education, at the same time, he can guide the leader. I think that's my take.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Adan, for your comments, and all of us for your comments. I think now my time is running out. My colleague is almost coming in for the other session, but I want to say thank you for the session that we have shared. And yes, coaching.
Madam,
yes.
Something small too. One thing I've seen with this coaching and mentorship, if leaders, if organization, they are allowed to have their staff who started with them climbing up the ladder. And then when they are at the top, they are the people who are able to manage this mentorship and coaching because they understand the organization very well. That one, I've seen it working with the experience that I've seen with the different organizations. So if we can entrench that, other than people coming from outside, they are being put on top of the organization, they have no organizational knowledge, then some things are coming from there. Thank you.
Yes. Yes, just office I shared with someone. Hello. Hello.
Yes.
Adan, kindly mute. We can hear your conversation. Okay. Madam Owino. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Good evening.
How are you, leaders?
Yeah, okay.
I can see Madam
Fatma.
Yes.
1 minute. Let me just finish in 1 minute, right? Please.
Okay. Yes. No worries. Please
Sorry. I think I've spoken for so long. I was just saying, ladies and gentlemen, that in the public sector, it is now a requirement. Not only that we may have the policy, but let's try and mainstream it. And as a leader, for me, if I can train those who are under me so that they can take these responsibilities out of my shoulder, then now you remain to do the strategic work or for strategic thinking for the organization. Yeah, some of us cannot be able to perform the strategic work because we are still concentrating on the technical bit of it. So coaching and mentoring helps us. One, we will not have a vacuum. Two, sometimes we have seen the public sector, a position becomes vacant, but for a very long time, we cannot find a replacement. Coaching and mentoring will help us with that. And even the young ones who are coming in, you've noticed even in most of your organizations today, public sector is taking these youngsters, what you're calling fast and furious or millennials, and putting them or attaching them to organizations, and they're even paid a salary. That tells you how much important this concept is for all of us. And as one of us had said, you don't have to have a coach from inside the organization. Even I'm not saying that those of us who are inside the organization cannot coach and mentor, they can, but for a strategic leader, sometimes you may need a thought process from someone outside who is coaching. So my challenge is, you may need to get a coach. They don't have to be people you have met physically. You may even read their books, listen to their videos, listen to their podcast, and be able to get their thought processes to help you in doing your work. So the challenge is to improve ourselves on these key skills. Thank you very much. And now we welcome our next presenter, Madam Fatma Amio, to speak to us. Karibu sana, Madam Fatma.
Thank you very much, Madam Owino. That was quite an insightful discussion. And I loved the energy and the discussions and the question that I think Evelyn posed, people to cascade policies. Good evening once again, leaders.
Good evening.
Good evening.
So in the time that we have left, we are going to look at two areas. The first is leadership communication. Then we are also going to have a discussion on protocol and etiquette. And just to find out, what is the nexus between leadership and communication? Is there any connection between these two terms, leadership and communication? Anyone? Yes, Samson, is your hand raised?
Yes.
Please proceed.
Allow me to try. Not that I know the answer, but when I look at leadership and the expectation of leadership, I think the primary role of leadership is to offer influence or to influence the way certain things are done with a view to achieving a particular or a given objective. Then how then can this influence take place? So this influence cannot take place in an environment where there is no communication. And communication to me is relaying the information in a way that is understandable, in a way that is clear, in a way that is accurate, in a way that is simple to the recipient of that information, with a view to also getting back feedback from the information which has just been relayed. So I tend to think that there can never be leadership without effective communication for purposes of implementation. Thank you.
Thank you, Samson. Quite apt, very clear about influence, how we are able to present information and get back with the purpose of influencing. You are unmuted. Do you want to say something, Oscar Barasa? Okay, Benson, your hand is raised. Please proceed.
Yes. Leadership is about also persuading others to actually follow your vision, or actually accept the way you handle things as a leader. But as well, communication also, if you don't handle communication well, you may end up also misleading your followers. Thank you.
Thank you. About persuading, but also ensuring that then you're not misconstrued courtesy of the way you plan your communication. Thank you for that. I can see another hand raised. Yes, Meshak?
Yes, Mwalimu, thank you so much. Leaders are carriers of the objectives and goals of an organization. And their role is to clearly disseminate this either internally or externally. And that is how through communication. So if there is a clear communication, then there will be unity of purpose. So leaders have to share this direction with the internal and external stakeholders. Thank you, Mwalimu.
Thank you. You brought in a very important component, which is usually in the strategic plan, where we are looking at our stakeholders. How do we ensure that we are able to engage with both internal as well as external audiences, ensuring that we are able to achieve their expectations by understanding them, but also being able to keep them informed of what is happening. Thank you for that. Evelyn, the last one, please proceed.
Yes, thank you. Now, communication, leadership and communication is one and the same time, because when you are a leader is the one who speaking and influencing people, communicating non-verbally or verbal communication, because it needs to be understood. What is this leader's, what is the vision? He must communicate it well from the top to the bottom so that people can understand it and follow it up to achieve the goal that they want to do. And then this communication, the leader should have easy communication so that whatever he's saying, people are able to embrace. Again, in communication, because we know followers, they embrace what the leader is doing. For example, now there is this motivation. How do you motivate people? Do you tell them thank you? Do you pat them at the back? That is communication. And this appreciation, it also molds a leader. So I think communication cannot go without, or leader cannot go without communication. Thank you.
Thank you, Evelyn. Indeed, the language of leadership is courtesy of the communication, and these two basically go hand in hand. Thank you for that. So I'm sure based on the different contributions, we see that when we talk about leadership communication as a leader, whatever you do, and Evelyn has said it right, that it's not just the verbal, but the non-verbal as well. So when we look at leadership communication, from the basic definition, we see that there's an issue of control. As a leader, you don't just communicate everything. We all know information is given on a need-to-know basis. Then there's the aspect of purposeful transfer of meaning. As a leader, from that strategic point that you are in, what do you want to share with the different stakeholders? So you're not communicating to all and sundry, but you must have a purpose of your communication. And then the last and most important bit is that how do you use your communication to influence? So if you're a leader and you don't want to rock the boat, then you must ask yourself, what is your purpose? Why are you leading if you do not want to create an influence? So when we look at that, then we must look at then what are the traits when it comes to leadership communication? And there are 4 main traits in leadership communication. The first is that as a leader, your communication must have significance. You're not petty. You're looking at very important things to discuss. And that is why a leader listens more than they speak. From the discussions that you had in terms of mentorship, in terms of coaching, in terms of ensuring that you're looking at your emotional intelligence, you're able to then communicate matters of significance. Because even as we look at where you lie in the organogram, you realize that you are up there. Therefore, to whom much is given, dear leaders, much is expected. The second is the issue of values. When we talk about leadership communication, the messages you give must be rooted in your core values and culture, so that then you are living.
Procurement plan presented for audit. Contrary, so maybe it was there.
You're not muted. Margaret, please mute so that we thank you. So as Margaret is talking about the procurement plan, we can see that that is of significance, right? So when we talk about the values, we are looking at how do you phrase your messages? Are they in tandem with the core values that your organization stands for? Then the third is the issue of consistency. As a leader, you must have some consistency in your communication so that then if you're dealing with your team, they know what your standards are, what is expected. And this consistency also comes from the policies. The question of, do we have communication policies and strategies that are locked up somewhere, or are we following these policies? So as a leader, we are guided by the different policies in our organization so that our communication is consistent with the legal framework that we uphold. And the fourth trait is cadence, and this means a pattern. Our communication should never look like it is sporadic. It should not be ad hoc. It must be well planned, well executed, where you're calling for a meeting, a stakeholder engagement, ensure that then that meeting takes place. If there are changes, communicate in good time so that then people can see that where you're planning for something, you ensure that you execute it to the latter so that then you're not a person who is always pushing things or rushing things. You will not look like you are well planned and structured as a leader. The other important thing when it comes to leadership communication is to look at the leadership model. Many of the things that you had discussed as I was listening in, you talked about the vision bearer. As a strategic leader, you are supposed to ensure that you can articulate and you can visualize the vision statements of your organization, because strategic leaders are guided by that strategic plan. Are you able as an eagle to see things and to articulate things that you are envisioning? And that will only happen courtesy of the communication, because many a times you find there are some leaders who have a very beautiful vision, but it is still within their minds. They're not able to convey this. And this then means that then people really are stuck. They don't know what it is what direction are we moving, right? The second is the plan. As a strategic leader, for you to help us reach that vision, for us to be world class, how do we get there? And the plan must be communicated in piecemeal so that then the team is able to appreciate that it is possible. I'm sure within our public sector institutions, we may have heard of that common phrase of tumeona wengi, meaning that anytime you want to initiate something, people are not resonating because the way you have packaged the change is not manageable. So the plan must be well articulated as well as communicated. The third is the issue of delegation. And based on what you had earlier discussed, at times unhealthy competition really destabilizes the whole element of delegation. So as much as delegation helps us to ensure that we are working as a team and there is no vacuum at any moment, many at times the communication part is what is a challenge, where at times there are no clear roles, individual roles, and the team responsibilities, or at times the delegation is done, but someone will still have a lot of control and they're still holding on. And we find that as much as we are talking about we are moving to one direction, the challenge is that people are still holding. Everyone is holding on and we're working in silos. And therefore, if you're working in silos, then we see that for us to get to that vision becomes pretty difficult. The fourth is the coaching, which you have talked about, and I will not belabor the point, but in coaching, you have to communicate. You have to be there to advise. You have to be there to listen. You have to be there. So when we are looking at how are you using your leadership communication to ensure that this concept of coaching is actually implementable. And then the last is motivation. When you're motivating, what is your role as a leader to ensure that then we are able to recognize the contribution of others? Remember, you cannot be a leader when you don't have followers. So who are you motivating within your team? And at times, for you to motivate, you may require that you are also motivated, but in some spaces, you need to look for the motivation within so that then you're able to carry on with this leadership journey. I'd like to pause here and throw the question of the challenges. When we look at public service or broadly public sector institutions, what are some of the communication challenges that you have observed? How are we faring on in our communication? It's open to the floor. How are we faring on in our communication? What are some of the challenges that you may have observed? Yes, Jacinta, please proceed. Jacinta, the floor is yours. Jacinta seems to be having a challenge. Anyone who may have observed challenges when it comes to communication? You may have very good intentions and you want to ensure that things are done in a particular way, but there could be some challenges that prevent you, that hinder you. Yes, John, your hand is raised. John, and then Jacinta,
Thank you. What I would like to say, some of the challenges that we experience in the public service, and there are many, but let me just mention one. As communication is done, you find there could be some what you call intra and even interdepartmental competitions that the person leading would be having good intention, but then they are going to face some resistance from other people who feel that this is supposed to be communication that is meant for us. Another department feels this is for us. So there is that, and this brings a breakdown. And information is not relayed as intended because of that competition, unnecessary competition. Thank you.
Thank you. Unhealthy competition. You know, they say information is power. So at times information is withheld so that then others are able to get, they can leverage. Aptly put, at times there is a challenge in terms of competition, which then negates the whole aspect of moving in one direction. Thank you, John, for that. Jacinta, please proceed.
Yeah, thank you. One of the greatest challenges most of the public institutions are facing is lack of a communication strategy, no communication policy. So everything is here and there. We get misinformation. I'll give a case in point where we had the boy from Tika who had a focal jempe on his head, how it was handled. So we felt, we look at it, you're like, should it have been the communication manager talking about this? Should it have been the PR person talking about this to the public? Who talks and to who at what time? Or rather, who communicates what to who and when? That is a big gap in the public sector.
Thank you, Jacinta. Gap in communication policy and strategy, and at times, even when the policy is there, do we ensure that we are aware of what is contained? Because the official spokesperson ought to be the accounting officer, but then do we have a strategic office to ensure that this communication is done in the right way? Thank you for that, Jacinta. Makini, please proceed.
Thank you very much. One of the things I in my view is the lack of feedback. Many times, maybe letters are written to the officers but not responded to. An officer writes a letter to, let's say, to one department or to HR perhaps, but no feedback. So largely, feedback is lacking. That's my take.
Thank you very much, Makini. We have very good service charters that give us timelines for our correspondences, but at times there's just lack of feedback, non-responsiveness. And at times it stems from just inability to make a decision to take action because you don't want to be accountable. Thank you for that. Thank you, Makini. Alinur, please proceed.
Thank you, Mwalimu. In the sphere where I work, I think there is a communication breakdown between the technical officers and the general public and maybe the layman persons, because sometimes as officers, we tend to collect a lot of information in form of public opinions, in form of surveys. We collect a lot of information from the general public, but when it comes to presenting reports to them, they come out as technical jargons and people rarely understand them. So I think there's a disconnect between how we communicate policies and outcomes of various reports to the general public.
Thank you very much, Alinur. So when we are communicating, at times we forget the audience. And how do we ensure that we are communicating? We are telling our story in a way that resonates, so that we are not too technical, so that then we make sense, so that then we are also able to be appreciated. One of the challenges is at times the ambiguity is also used as a strategy, but nonetheless, thank you for that. Thank you for that, Alinur. We move on to Meshach. Meshach,
Yes,
please proceed.
yes, thank you. There's this issue of non-prioritization of communication. In this sense, especially allocation of resources. There are certain other departments which are viewed as important than this, so they get more resources, and then at the end of it, communication left on the edge, and yet communication requires a lot of resources.
Thank you, Meshach.
Hello? Yes,
Yes, you talked about resource allocation, isn't it?
Yes.
Aptly put, that at times they are very probably minimum resources allocated to communication, because then it does not look like it has a lot of impact, but it is very important. And remember, when we look at communication, especially public communication, it is one of the fundamental things that we are meant to do. Because remember, we are accountable. So without communication, then there will be a challenge. So how much resources do we allocate? And this probably Meshach talks about the resources. I don't know whether it's just in terms of budget, but it can be looked at in a wider perspective, because the personnel too, who is handling the communication, and where is communication within our organogram? Where is it placed? Is it a strategic function, or is it left as an operational function? Thank you, Meshach. Benson?
Thank you very much. Mine is about selective communication, that you may want to communicate to those who may not be able to question you. And at times you find that you may agree to only do vertical communication, but not horizontal communication. Thank you.
Thank you. Selective communication, because again, how do you use information to either leave out some members? So again, you have put it right, where you withhold information with a particular purpose. So remember that that would not ensure that we move together as a team, because all the different flows of communication are extremely important. So where we are withholding, that becomes a challenge. And we only give information according to the people who we find would be loyal or who would accept to take action. Thank you very much. Shall we move on to Umi? Then we finish with Evelyn. Umi, please proceed.
One of the things that I've observed is that at times we fail to use the right communication tools, and then also timeliness of communication. So you don't use the right communication tools to communicate important information, and then secondly, you delay communication. And as being in the public sector, I think timeliness is very important. At times, you wait until the matter is out there in the public and people are reacting to the situation before you now send out an official communication as an organization. That's my contribution.
Thank you very much, Umi. That is a very powerful one, because then for strategic communication, dear leaders, it has to be proactive, not reactive. You have little influence when you are responding than when you are the initiator. So are you able to identify what is the right time to communicate so that then you're not firefighting? And that is the situation that we find ourselves in most of the times, right? Evelyn, and then Sami will find it.
Thank you. Mine, it's about the bureaucracy of communication in the public sector. You find that communication has to pass so many stages, such that by the time it is reaching where it is supposed to, it has taken a lot of time, like the others have said. You find that in the public sector, people are not very well liberated, let me use that word, like the private sector, whereby the line managers can be able to make a decision and they act on it. But in the public sector, you find that a certain leader somewhere has to make decisions so that it trickles down to the subordinates, so that an action can be taken. Number two, this communication, the policy can be there, but is it supported by the top leadership such that whatever happens, the communication, how the modes of communication, we know there are so many, the media of communication, a lot of it, but do they support it such that when a junior staff makes a decision, is covered? Because sometimes the feedback, the repercussion of the feedback now, it also makes the workers or the employees in the public service sometimes to fear, not even to communicate or to ignore the communication, because sometimes the repercussion is not encouraging. So me, I think this bureaucracy should be looked into, such that people within the ranks can be able to make decisions and the decisions are accepted at the top level. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Evelyn. So where we have unnecessary red tape, which delays our communication, and there are instances where there are policies in place, but then they are not supported. So where there is lack of goodwill from the leadership, and the leaders are here in this meeting today, leaders, remember we say those messages must be rooted in the values and culture. Therefore, if people have fear of consequences if they communicate or take action, then definitely you're encouraging a culture of just let us wait and see approach, which will not be helpful for communication to thrive. We move on to Sami, and then lastly, so I think Innocent. Sami, please proceed.
Madam, I am hoping to discuss something on the decoding and the encoding of the message, or rather the communication you want to pass. The way you package the information determines the way the other person will receive it. So in this manner, you should consider the ability of the person receiving the information, whether you need, to go and clarify, or you need somebody to go and expound on the issue that person is expected to undertake. For example, take for instance the provincial administration. A memo is being done from Harambee House to assistant chiefs countrywide. You will ask yourselves, do they really understand the concept that is being disseminated from the Harambee House, or you will need a medium to explain to the chiefs in the remote areas what is expected of them? So I found that one to be something that needs also to be seen as a challenge to the communication. Thank you.
Thank you. And that was a very apt example that you used. Are you able to resonate with your audience so that then you can tone down the language or identify a channel that would allow for an understanding? Because you talked about how would the message be interpreted, especially when you're dealing with different levels and different expectations, yet the transfer of meaning must be shared. Thank you. Thank you very much for that. Innocent?
Thank you for the opportunity. I will look at it in a different angle, whereby I look at it as we are poor receivers of information or communication. Why do I say so? We, in an organization, let me use, because I worked in private and public sector. If you look in an organization where whether we are communicating internally, we are so used to, when we see communication from which is internal, we tend to brush or not even take in or about the information or give feedback. So normally when we see such kind of communication, whether it's internal or external, so long as it doesn't concern you, you have no interest to look at it, or even if it concerns you, you have no time for it. So I think that is where sometimes we fail to take into account or to take keen interest on this communication that is put across. Some might affect us directly, but because we are reluctant or the normal wish-wash, whether I give my feedback or I don't, they will do what they want. So I think that is where we have also failed as leaders, where we also don't take keen interest in this communication. We don't give feedback as a leader. We don't question, you don't give a different opinion, because by doing that, you are giving feedback. So once you don't give feedback, it will not be taken into account, and we'll keep on complaining that we gave feedback, or even if we give feedback, it will not be taken into account. So that is my input. Thank you, Malem.
Thank you, Innocent. So aptly put, as a leader, what culture, what tone are you setting? So if you're not giving feedback and you don't care about receiving or giving feedback, then that is what you're communicating very loud and clear. So thank you, Innocent. Therefore, the messages will be ignored, and we will see a lot of lethargy when it comes to how our teams operate. And when we look at our strategic plans, one of the weaknesses that is there in many of organizations is the issue of negative feedback amongst employees, where people just don't care. And again, remember, for leadership communication, it's about influence. So when you have people with a negative attitude, you need to now delve deeper to identify what is the root cause and how do you now work around that. Thank you for that. Saumu?
Thank you, Mwalimu. Mine is about communicating to the public. Most of our organizations either use press releases or press conferences. And to reach a wider audience, probably you need use the social media platform or also the mainstream media. The mainstream media sometimes does not give priority to your message because probably it's not the hot thing at that point. When we go to the social media platform, you find maybe most of the organizations, especially the public organizations, do not have a lot of wide audience in terms of getting followers in this social media. So we don't reach so many people, and our message do not get to the right people. We give the communication, but it does not reach a lot of people. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. And that is where the communication strategy would come in to identify. So how do we reach to our target population? But obviously that would mean that there must be effort put to reach out so that it is not just about saying we just communicated, but were you intentional in that communication to ensure that then you reach the masses that you have to reach? Thank you for that. And lastly, Lucy. Lucy, please close this conversation.
Thank you so much. I just want to concur with one of the speakers who was saying that leadership really directs how communication will be done. Because in an organization, the culture is actually set by a leader, a particular leader at that time. You find that when a leader appreciates communication from the juniors downwards, the other people will respect that. But if the leader does not appreciate, even the other people will ignore the message. For example, you might send an email to people. Depending on where it comes from, people will respond. People will check who is the originator of that message, so they can gauge, do they respond or do they not respond. That way now, but if a culture is said that the leader appreciates and guides people to be responding to communication, now the culture will pick up. But if the leader does not support, it goes like that. Even communication from outside, responding, how is it responded to? If the leader is not keen, it will still be like that. Thank you so much, madam.
Thank you very much, Lucy. So as a leader, you set the tone. Remember, the source credibility is very important. So what you do is what then perpetuates within the organization. So aptly put, as a leader, you have to ensure that you set the tone. What do you want to see? So if you're non-responsive, if you're not respectful, the tone you use, if you're talking down on people, that is what is going to carry on within that particular organization. So that said, as much as we're facing many challenges, one of the things that leaders are meant to do is ensure that then they understand the context that they're in. Get to understand the culture, get to understand the context, so that then you're able to identify what strategy are you going to use. As a leader, you argument the corporate communication, because remember, leadership is not about the function you play, but you are the #1 brand ambassador. So when it comes to marketing of your organization, you come in handy. When it comes to management communication, the issue of feedback that you have talked about really stands out. When it comes to the organogram, organizational communication, as a leader, you must ensure that then you're able to show how communication is supposed to flow in the organization. When things are piling, when there are unnecessary bureaucracies, it is the leaders who are able to identify the loopholes. And remember, the documents that we prepare are guiding frameworks. They're not cast in stone. So it's for you to identify as a leader. Until you identify the gaps, then nothing much will be done. So I challenge you to identify the communication gaps in your organizations, and also what are you doing about it? So if it is about being reactive, what can be done about it? If it is about the information gap, what is being done about it? If it is a breakdown, what are we doing about it? So we have to also take charge within our communication. I would now like to go to the second part, and I can see we only have 5 minutes. Nonetheless, we will see how much we can stretch. I saw an interesting discussion on the parking lot that alluded to protocol and etiquette being foreign concepts. Do you agree with that? And I think the discussion went to matters to do with dining etiquette. Do you agree that etiquette and protocol are foreign concepts? I think the discussion had been started by Evelyn, and the question was, it looks more Western than African. Evelyn, are you on the call? Or anyone who can chime in this discussion? Yes, Evelyn. Please.
Yes.
Please tell us. So you think, or you feel it's more Western than African?
Yeah, why I'm feeling it is more Western than us ourselves, where the etiquette is supposed to be consumed, is that whenever you go to any hotel, whenever you go to any community, you will not find people eating with spoons and forks. And it is only Africans, we are a society that loves socialization, love eating together, and also and living together. And whatever from our history is that we like sharing. But here, when you give me a fork and a spoon, you are separating me so much from my community, or maybe my close community members, because we like sharing is it a plate? Or sometimes even if I have my own plate, I will use my hands to eat. Now, do we embrace that which has not been accepted, or which has not been practiced by many people, or it is these little things that happen? And by the way, when did we ever, the last time we reviewed our etiquette policy or things like that? Because they only came from the Western during colonial time. You look at the tie, where we have been, we are needed to always, men go with a tie and a suit, women, there is a description of how they should dress, and yet we have our own dresses, which are very smart, which we go to the offices. So that is what motivated my need to start the debate, and I think it's only good that we are left with our own etiquette. Let it be ingrained in our culture, or in our policies at workplace and everywhere else. Asante.
Thank you, Evelyn. That was very passionate. That's come on, we ought not to just emulate. Okay, I saw two hands, Abdiwahid and Saman.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mwalimu. Tumeshukuru sana. This discussion has been very nice. I think you've taken up very informative. The issue of etiquette, I think there is two sides to it. One, it's all about being strategic. It's mostly as a leader, you mostly engage with people. Sometimes people can look at the small things that you do and have perception or the kind of country. So, in as much as we have our own culture, I like the way, for example, the Japanese and the Chinese are, because they don't have culture, but they know so much about Western culture, because they knew they had to adapt to their etiquettes without abandoning their culture. So if it comes, for example, how to hold a fork, they know. But when they come to, so when they go to New York, they will do that. Of course, when they're dining, they'll go through all the etiquettes and what have you. But when someone, for example, an American comes to Japan, or they come to China, they will teach them how to eat with the sticks, isn't it? So it's all about being strategic. And the other issue, etiquette is not only about our African identity, or because there is more to it. Is something about also pecking order. And I think even in our society, we have some level of pecking order. For example, you don't shout to, for example, your elders. It's a way in which you are supposed to sit. Things like recognizing who is who first. I mean, it's also very key, especially the issues of protocol. Protocol can be a very important thing in life, something that's very strategic. Funding, including even a very initiation of a very important project or even a program. And therefore, I think what the curriculum that we are going through is not in vain. It's something that is very good. It's not teaching us to live our culture. We can have our culture, but we need to be also to be sensible in terms of how we eat, we dress, how we behave in certain areas, and especially, I think important is the issue of protocol. It's very, very. Sometimes it can really break. a very strategic thing, and sometimes getting back that relationship may not.
Thank you very much, Abdi Wahid. Oscar, if you could kindly mute. Oscar Baraza, kindly mute so that we can. Thank you, Oscar. Yes, that was quite well put, Abdi Wahid, that when we talk about protocol and etiquette, we are not necessarily referring to the Western philosophies. And I like that you use the issue of respect, as we have been socialized. We have been socialized to have respect for authority. And therefore, there are things that we do out of the courtesies, our own. So the word protocol and etiquette may be foreign. Protocol comes from the Greek philosophy. It's a Greek word. And etiquette comes from the French civilization, right? But the concepts behind, I am sure they are so African that really help us as leaders. Because remember where a leader is in the organogram, you're up there. So there are expectations as to how you conduct yourselves. Therefore, I think, as Abdi Wahid said, when we look at our code of conduct, it helps us to guide our workplace etiquette. We have general expectations as to how we conduct ourselves. And there's nothing as beautiful as knowing the rules, but choosing to pick what works for you. That is why even at the workplace, we have to agree on how we show up. In some organizations, they've gone ahead to prescribe a dressing policy. As public officers, we are expected to ensure that we maintain the integrity of the offices that we hold. Therefore, discussions, protocol, and etiquette are very important for leaders so that then we are able to be ahead to ensure that we bring about the confidence in our organizations. I saw a hand raised by Sami. Sami, please proceed.
Thank you, Madam. I think I will follow the concept on the gentleman who has just spoken, that we don't have to take etiquette to be maybe dining etiquette or even a dress code etiquette. Etiquettes are some things that are ingrained also in us as Africans. For example, well, in where we are coming from, it is very indisciplined for somebody to take meals while talking, because they believe that you will be choked. So our understanding of etiquette should not be meant that at certain occasions you should be dressing like this. Take for instance, we've seen Senator Ledama Olekina dressing in his, being dressed in his Maasai regalia at the Senate. The Senate found it fit to appreciate the African attire as part of the etiquette. So it is us ourselves who are well accustomed to European etiquettes instead of trying to inculcate our own etiquettes. So the concept here is not the imported etiquette, it is the mannerisms, or rather the manners that we have been taught by our different cultures, that we should abide by them. And some of these cultures that we are all accustomed to are at the best. The only difference is that we've suppressed our own culture and our own etiquettes, and we are borrowing the European one. So it is my interest that in as much as also we are developing the etiquettes and several protocols for several institutions, or name them, let us embrace what President Kibaki did to us, the public servants, that you are even allowed to trace your African attire on certain occasions. I would wish to see a day that a Turkana gentleman will trace in his own regalia, I mean, in even work environment, for example, on a Friday, for us to appreciate the diverse culture that we have. So the issue that Madam Evelyn was raising was perhaps the use of cutlery, which is not actually something that some of us also are interested in. We've traveled, we've gone to Arab world, whereby people are not using, you are not even given that fork and knife. For example, if you go to UAE, there are some hotels, they may not serve you with the cutlery. Why? They will believe, they would want you to behave like them. So to other places, maybe unless you request that there are a pool of cutleries there, you will pick them if you would want. So it is upon us also to inculcate the same spirit in ourselves, that it is not a must to use those things, provided you get your services at the best level. So my take is, let us not see this issue of etiquette from one angle. Let us also see it from other things. There are some things which may not have been in our community, like the phones we're using to communicate. How are we going to handle phone etiquette? There are other concepts, like, for example, maybe things, I mean, if I may speak of things which we are not used to, things which were not there during our great-grandparents, the new norms that we've developed recently, how are we going to handle them? Like, for example, if you are using teleconferencing like this one we're using, first etiquette dictates that you should be showing your face. And a number of us, we are not doing it here. That's also lack of etiquette. Basically, if you are in a classroom like this, Mwalimu, you will agree with me that in our SMCs, we were told you need to display your face if you are doing virtual classes, but we are not. Maybe because of some other reasons. So this term etiquette is too broad that if we can try to say this one is right, this one is wrong, we will be crisscrossing ourselves, we will not even move forward. So I believe that there are those basic things that we need to embrace. For example, you can't wear a trouser, a short trouser, I mean, on Monday, and a necktie. Those are basic things that we have to agree that it works. There are others that you can see yourselves. I mean, if you are dressed in African attire, well, you will see yourself, you are in a better place. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sami, for that. Indeed, etiquette and protocol is not just the things that we may have taken up. Yes, there are things that we have taken up, but remember the discussion starts from the leaders. So as leaders, what is your zone of tolerance? What does it mean when you're creating that policy? Are you alive to the fact that then it is broad? As we talked about the issues of phone etiquette, as leaders, how are we even engaging with our phones? As we show up in different events and we are handling, probably we're delivering a speech, how are we doing those small things that really matter? So indeed, leaders' discussions on protocol and etiquette are very important, but more so because they are culturally oriented. So are you also able to do your research? And Sami has given us a very beautiful example. You go to other places, you find that this is how they do things. So as a leader, are you quick to learn, quick to appreciate, and also quick to share? This is how we do things here. Or are you still probably stuck in the past and you're not willing, you're not flexible, right? So yes, Sophie, I know that is an excuse. Sophie, I have seen your response on why there is no display of faces on a light note that the bandwidth. Lastly, I will allow Samson. I know we have run past the time. Samson, please proceed, and then we wind up.
Okay, thank you, Mwalimu. I think this is a very, very interesting discussion. And just as you rightly said about etiquette and the protocol, the words can be used interchangeably. But when I look at the deeper meaning and in a very simplistic way, we find that etiquette deals more with custom or culture, while protocol deals with official or standard procedure of doing things. Now, the question which bothers me is what was the intention in both? So when I look at protocol, I tend to think that there was that deeper interest to have a standard way of doing things, to have a known, well-defined way of doing things, because the rate at which life is moving today, changes are taking place quite fast. But the question which I want to ask is, to what extent, what can improve or shift? Because when you look at it from the example given through the use of a cutlery, again, it is good, but what are the emerging issues which makes it relevant? If you look at protocol, again, what if we are in a society where pieces of information or directives come from left, right, and center? So I tend to think that both are very much important. They are not very foreign, just as you say that the words might be foreign, but in terms of the intended objective, I want to believe they are very relevant. But the question which should linger in our minds is, to what extent can etiquette be modernized? Because I also saw somebody ask, where does modernization start from and where does the culture end? So to what extent can this be modernized in line of the emerging issues in the day-to-day life? Thank you.
Thank you, Samson. And I think you have unpacked the question asked by Innocent, where does modernization start and where does our culture stop? So when it comes to protocol, protocol is about observance of rank and precedence. When we look at, for example, our organogram, it's very clear as to the levels, the pecking order and seniority, and how everything is supposed to be done in that order, right? When it comes to etiquette, we are looking at socially acceptable behavior for a person, a responsible person. So this discussion means that they too are never cast in stone. I'll give you an example. When it comes to sitting protocol, supposing you're having an event in your organization and you are probably third in command, right? It doesn't mean that you'll always sit where you usually sit, because where people sit is not just based on their hierarchical order. There could also be other factors. For example, maybe you have guests, and therefore whoever is to be on the right and to the left would change a bit. At times it's about functionality. Who needs to be closest to probably the CEO so that then they're able to discuss, right? So if we are to look at protocol, it will never be cast in stone. It gives us rules on how things are supposed to be done, but depending on case by case, those rules would change a little bit. Where do you usually sit, right? If we are to look at the other hand on etiquette, etiquette is never cast in stone too. We have socially acceptable norms. For example, if you are in a meeting, you sit in the board and there's a way that you're supposed to engage at that level. That will be very different from how you are expected to conduct yourself when we are having a cocktail in the evening. So that's why we are saying it's about understanding. Remember, discussions about protocol and etiquette border around what I think Sami talked about, simple things, common sense. But the common sense must be a discussion that is shared, so that then within the organization as leaders, it's very clear on who is important. For example, if your phone rings and you're in a meeting, there are those calls that you have to pick, but where do you pick them? And there are those calls that can wait because of where you are. There are those meetings that when you go, there's a way you have to sit up. straight, and because that is what is expected. If you're slouching, if you're closed up, then you're sending mixed signals. And remember, we are looking at where our culture determines those rules. Therefore, we don't pick everything. I know you're asking like modernization, just like globalization. An example is my dress, my choice. Within public service, it's not about my dress, my choice, because we are dealing with the wider public and the expectations are high. Therefore, we must have a zone of tolerance. What is acceptable? And I think Kipto gave us an example of a tie and pair of shorts. When you show up in the office that way, people would ask you, are you okay? Because it's not the norm. So the culture, and the culture here is the organizational culture. Just like if we are to look at the different professions, engineers, when they're going for their site visits, you expect them to be dressed in a particular way. But then when they show up in the boardroom, they will be dressed in a different way. No one will forget and come with the safety helmet or safety boots, because context is what matters. So I wish to stop there and leave you with a thought-provoking question. These two terms, what do you call them in your native language? What is etiquette and what is protocol in your mother tongue? So that then we don't think about the things that we have taken, the ties and the cutlery, but we see things from a broader perspective. Thank you very much. We have gone 18 minutes past, but I believe I can now hand the session over to the president. It was a pleasure. And maybe before we end this call, I would like to see your faces. Sammy has challenged us. Sammy, I thought you'd be the first to turn on your video.
Well, I will turn. Let me. I'm on now, right? Let me agree. Yes.
Well, if everyone could turn on their video so that I'm sure I was talking to real people. Awesome. Now I can see I was talking to real human beings. So it was a pleasure. Looking forward. And I'm challenging you, let people see a difference in your leadership communication. Part of leadership communication is also your nonverbal codes, the way you show up, the way you present yourself. And all the best in your endeavors. I wish to hand the session officially back to the president. At least I have seen Samson, I have seen Oscar, I have seen Sammy. The others are still looking for their video buttons. Abdi Wahid, and Abdi Wahid, I know you're almost going to break your phone, so I wouldn't want to keep you longer. So may I kindly hand the session back to the president? It was a pleasure, and all the best, dear leaders. Please represent us well.
Thank you, Mwalimu. We appreciate.
Thank you.
We appreciate for that wonderful session. And we also want to appreciate Mwalimu in absentia. We were not able to appreciate her, but we thank you so much for the good time that we have had. And as leaders, we promise and hope that we'll practice and walk the talk. And we'll be changed leaders as we move forward. So thank you, Mwalimu, so much. And to the rest of the leaders, unless you have any other issue, we can continue chatting and engaging each other in our main chat. And before we call off, I'd like to ask Rose to give us a closing word of prayer, unless there is any other issue. Good. Then Rose, you can give us a closing word of prayer. Thank you.
Okay, let us pray. Father, we come before you this evening with a lot of thanksgiving in our hearts. We thank you for the opportunity to come together and learn. We thank you for the knowledge that we continue to acquire, and everything that we learn may make a difference to the society we live in, and also to the people that are looking up to us. We pray this, trusting and believing in Jesus' name. Amen.
Enjoy your evening off.
Amen.
Thank you. Bye.
Amen.
Thank you and bye-bye.
Bye. Amina.
Bye.